My name is Rachel Bennett, and I'm 34 years old. I own a small but successful auto repair and fleet maintenance business in upstate New York. My life revolves around grease-stained coveralls, roaring engines, and long days at the shop with the crew I consider family. It's not glamorous, but it's honest work, and it pays well enough that I've built something I'm proud of. But to my younger sister, Emily, none of that matters. Emily is a rising star at a prestigious law firm in Manhattan, and in her world, status and appearances are everything. She wears designer suits and drinks overpriced lattes, while I'm more at home with a socket wrench and a cup of black coffee. Last Thanksgiving, Emily made it painfully clear just how little she values me, or the life I've built. She didn't just insult me or look down on me, she banned me from the table, embarrassed by my blue-collar background in front of her elite colleagues. What she didn't know was that I've been carrying a secret for 7 years, one that would shatter her perfect image and turn her carefully curated world upside down. By the end of that night, everyone at her fancy dinner would know the truth. 3 days before Thanksgiving, I was elbow-deep in the engine of a delivery van when my phone buzzed in my back pocket. I wiped my hands on a rag and glanced at the screen. Emily. My sister didn't call me often, so I figured it was important. "Hey, Em," I answered, tucking the phone between my shoulder and ear while tightening a bolt. "What's up?" Her voice came through a little too bright, like she'd been rehearsing. "Rachel, hi. So, about Thursday, Thanksgiving, I'd been planning to drive down to her place early to help cook, like I did every year." "Yeah, what about it?" She hesitated, and I could practically hear her biting her lip. "Well, this year's a little different. Some colleagues from the firm will be joining us. Senior partners, associates, important people." I smirked, even though she couldn't see me. "Okay, sounds fancy. Should I bring extra stuffing?" "Very funny," she said, but her laugh was tight. "Look, I want everything to go perfectly. These dinners are a big deal. Networking, impressions, all that." "And?" I prompted, knowing there was more. "There," she said carefully, "when they ask what you do, maybe you could phrase it differently." That made me pause. "Phrase it differently? What do you mean?" Instead of saying you run an auto repair shop," she rushed out, "maybe just say you're in automotive consulting. It sounds more professional." I felt my chest tighten. "So you want me to lie?" "No, not lie," she protested quickly. "You do consult. You help businesses manage their vehicle fleets and maintenance schedules, right? It's technically true. It just sounds better." "Better for who?" I asked, my voice sharper than I intended. "For everyone," she said after a beat. "Rachel, these people are Ivy League lawyers. They negotiate mergers and corporate acquisitions. I don't want anyone making assumptions about you, or me." Ah, there it was, the truth beneath the sugarcoating. I swallowed hard, forcing a calm tone. "Fine, automotive consulting it is." "Thank you," Emily said, relief flooding her voice. "Oh, and maybe wear something nice, like that dress you wore to Aunt Clara's birthday. It looked very appropriate." After we hung up, I stood there in my garage, surrounded by the familiar smell of oil and metal, my hands still smudged with grease. Emily didn't see the long hours, the risk I'd taken to build my business. To her, I'd always just be the sister who worked with her hands. And no matter what I called my job, it was clear she'd never really be proud of me. After Emily hung up, I stayed in the garage for a while, just listening to the quiet hum of the space heater and the occasional creak of the building settling. Her words replayed in my mind, sharp and bitter. Automotive consulting, like the truth wasn't good enough. My gaze drifted to the framed photo on the wall. Dad, standing proudly beside me on the day I opened my first shop. His hands were as calloused as mine are now, his smile wide despite the exhaustion in his eyes. 7 years ago, that smile disappeared forever. Dad's heart gave out suddenly, leaving behind nothing but debts and unpaid bills. He'd worked himself to the bone as a mechanic and part-time plumber just to keep a roof over our heads. When he died, Emily was in her first year of law school, drowning in tuition payments and ready to quit. I remember sitting on the floor of my tiny apartment, holding her tear-stained letter about dropping out. She was devastated, convinced her dream was over. I made a promise to Dad that night, standing over his old workbench. I'll take care of her. I'll make sure she finishes. So I sold my beloved Chevy truck, emptied my savings, and took every high-risk job I could find. Late-night highway repairs, toxic cleanups, you name it. Slowly, my little shop grew into a full-blown business, but every extra penny went not to me, but to Emily. With Aunt Clara's help, I set up a trust fund in Dad's name so Emily would think the money came from him. Every month, $3,500 went out like clockwork: tuition, books, even her apartment deposit. Emily never suspected a thing. She just believed her brilliant future had been Dad's final gift. She had no idea it was me, sacrificing everything so she could soar. Thanksgiving morning dawned cold and gray, the kind of November day where you can see her breath hanging in the air. I loaded a couple of homemade pies into the backseat of my pickup and drove the hour and a half to Emily's house. She lived in a spotless, modern colonial in one of those neighborhoods where all the lawns looked professionally trimmed and every driveway had a luxury car parked in it. I pulled up a little before noon, early enough to help with the cooking like I did every year. As soon as Emily opened the door, her eyes swept over me and immediately narrowed. "You wore that?" she asked instead of saying hello. I looked down at my jeans and sweatshirt, still clean, thank you very much. "Relax, Em, I brought my dress. I figured I'd change after we finish with the turkey." She let out a sharp breath. "Fine, just make sure you put it on before the guests arrive. Tonight's important." I stepped inside, taking in the gleaming marble floors and perfectly staged decor. The place felt more like a magazine spread than a home. As I followed Emily toward the kitchen, something caught my eye. A family photo on the mantel was missing. Last year, there'd been a picture of me and Dad at my trade school graduation, his arms slung proudly around my shoulders. Now there was just an empty space. While I stood there, stunned, Emily breezed past me holding another frame, one of the two of us at a 4th of July barbecue years ago. Without hesitation, she slid it into a drawer. "Too casual," she muttered, like it was a centerpiece instead of a memory. My throat tightened, but I said nothing. The kitchen looked like a war zone of side dishes and serving trays. I rolled up my sleeves, ready to help, but Emily hovered like a general directing troops, rearranging place settings and adjusting floral arrangements. Every move she made screamed one thing: control. As I stirred the gravy, a heavy feeling settled in my gut. This wasn't going to be the warm, messy family dinner I'd been hoping for. No, tonight felt like a performance, and I had a sinking suspicion I was about to play the role of unwanted guest. By 2 o'clock, the house smelled like roasted turkey and cinnamon. Emily flitted from room to room like a hummingbird on caffeine, checking every detail. I'd changed into the navy dress she demanded, though I still felt out of place in a sea of polished silverware and crystal glasses. The doorbell chimed, sharp and bright, and Emily nearly jumped out of her heels. "They're here," she hissed, smoothing her dress. "Remember, automotive consulting." I bit back a sigh and nodded. Whatever kept the peace. The first to arrive were a young associate named Derek and his wife. They were all warm smiles and air kisses as Emily ushered them in. Then came another couple, and another, until the foyer was buzzing with designer coats and the low murmur of polite conversation. Finally, Jonathan Hayes walked in. He was exactly the kind of man Emily admired. Tall, impeccably dressed, with the kind of confidence that came from decades of winning cases and commanding respect. His handshake was firm, his smile charming, but his eyes were sharp and calculating. "Jonathan," Emily beamed like a spotlight had just landed on her. "I'm so honored you could make it," he said smoothly before glancing my way. "And this must be your sister." Emily stiffened almost imperceptibly. "Yes, this is Rachel. She, works in a technical field." I raised an eyebrow. "Technical field, huh?" That was one way to put it. Jonathan nodded politely, but before I could respond, Derek piped up with genuine curiosity. "Oh, what kind of technical work do you do, Rachel?" I opened my mouth, ready to explain about my shop, our contracts with local businesses, and the fleet maintenance services we offered. But Emily swooped in like a hawk. "She's basically a car mechanic," Emily said with a tight laugh. "She fixes vehicles and stuff." The room went quiet for half a beat before Derek gave a polite, "Oh, how interesting." His smile didn't quite reach his eyes. His wife's did, but it was tinged with condescension. Heat rose in my cheeks. I wasn't ashamed of my work, but the way Emily said it, like I was a kid showing off a lemonade stand, made me feel about 2 inches tall. "Blue-collar jobs are so essential," another associate added, voice dripping with false sweetness. Emily nodded vigorously, steering the conversation away. "Exactly. Now, Jonathan, tell us about that merger deal you mentioned." As laughter and chatter swirled back to legal topics, I sat silently at the edge of the room, my jaw tight. Emily didn't just want to hide my career tonight. She wanted to erase it entirely. And for now, I let her, even as my anger simmered just beneath the surface. As the conversation in the living room swelled with talk of mergers and corporate takeovers, I slipped toward the kitchen to grab a glass of water. My head was pounding from forcing a polite smile while Emily pretended I didn't exist. I had barely reached the counter when Emily swooped in, shutting the door behind her with a sharp click. "Rachel," she hissed, her perfectly manicured hands fluttering like startled birds. "What are you doing? You're making things awkward." I frowned, gripping the edge of the counter. "Awkward? I've barely said 2 words all night." "Exactly," she said, pacing like a caged tiger. "You don't understand these people. They're not like us. They went to Harvard, Yale, they're power players. If you start talking about carburetors and brake pads..." My patience snapped. "I don't just fix cars, Emily. I run a business, a successful one." Her face pinched. "Look, can you please just stay back here, help with the food? I'll tell them you're not feeling well or something." I stared at her, stunned. "You want me to hide in the kitchen at Thanksgiving?" Her voice dropped to a whisper, cold and sharp. "You don't fit in here, Rachel. You never have." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. It wasn't just tonight. She wasn't just embarrassed by my job. She was ashamed of me, of us, of the life we came from. Behind us, a soft voice broke the tense silence. "Oh, honey," Aunt Clara said, stepping into view from the pantry doorway. Her expression was a mix of sadness and quiet fury. "Did you really just say that to your sister?" Emily flushed crimson. "Aunt Clara, please, this is..." "No," Clara interrupted firmly. "I've heard enough." I met Clara's steady gaze, my heart pounding. In that moment, something hardened inside me. I'd spent 7 years protecting Emily, sacrificing for her, hiding truths to spare her pride. But I was done hiding. If Emily wanted to erase me tonight, she was about to find out just how impossible that really was. By the time dinner was served, Emily had arranged the seating like a battlefield strategist. She placed herself squarely in the center, surrounded by Jonathan Hayes and the senior associates. I was banished to the far end, practically in the shadow of the swinging kitchen door. The turkey looked beautiful, the sides were perfect, and the wine flowed freely, but the atmosphere was stifling. Conversations swirled around mergers, acquisitions, and billion-dollar cases, topics I had nothing to contribute to. I focused on my plate, answering politely whenever someone asked me to pass the rolls. Halfway through the meal, Jonathan Hayes set down his wine glass and leaned forward, his sharp eyes landing on me. "So, Rachel," he said smoothly, "your last name sounds familiar. Bennett, right? I feel like I've seen it on some paperwork recently." Emily stiffened instantly. "Oh, she's just..." Jonathan held up a hand, silencing her. "No, let her answer." I sat up a little straighter. "Well, I run Bennett Automotive Solutions. We handle fleet maintenance and repair for several local businesses and municipal departments." Jonathan's eyebrows rose. Fleet maintenance, you say? Are you the ones handling the county's service vehicles? Yes, I confirmed. And we recently signed a contract with a couple of regional delivery companies. Emily let out a brittle laugh. She's exaggerating. It's just a small garage, mostly cars and trucks. You know, basic stuff. I turned to her, my blood simmering. Actually, Emily, we have a staff of 60 and multiple service bays. It's more than just basic stuff. Jonathan's eyes gleamed with recognition. Bennett Automotive Solutions, his voice carried through the room. We've been trying to secure a meeting with that company for months. They handle half the commercial fleets in this region. The table went silent. Forks froze midair. Emily's face went pale, then flushed a deep, angry red. That's impossible. Rachel doesn't. She just fixes cars. Jonathan gave her a sharp look. Emily, your sister's company brought in over $12 million in revenue last year, if I recall correctly. They're the largest independent fleet maintenance provider in the state. Gasps rippled around the table. One associate even coughed into his napkin, trying to hide his shock. I met Emily's wide, panicked eyes. Still think I don't belong here? I asked softly. For once, Emily had no clever comeback, just silent, seething humiliation. The room was still buzzing from Jonathan's revelation when I reached down and pulled a sealed cream envelope from my purse. I laid it carefully in the middle of the table, right beside the untouched gravy boat. Emily blinked at it, then let out a high, nervous laugh. What is this, Rachel? An invoice for your mechanic work? Going to bill me for dinner? Her attempt at humor fell flat. No one laughed. I folded my hands in my lap, my voice steady. Actually, it's a record of every payment I've made on your behalf for the last 7 years. Her brow furrowed. What are you talking about? I met her gaze head on. Your tuition, your books, your rent when you couldn't make it that first year. Every bar exam prep course, every mysterious loan that suddenly disappeared. That was me, Emily. I've been sending $3,500 a month without fail since Dad died. For a moment, there was only stunned silence. Then Emily laughed again, but it was sharp and brittle. That's ridiculous. It was Dad's trust fund, you know that. At the far end of the table, Aunt Clara set down her fork with a decisive clink. No, sweetheart, she said gently but firmly. I helped Rachel set it up. There was no inheritance from your father. He didn't have a penny to leave. Rachel sold her truck, drained her savings, and worked herself half to death to create that fund for you. Jonathan's sharp eyes darted between us. Wait, he said slowly. So Rachel funded Emily's entire education without Emily knowing? I nodded. I promised Dad on his deathbed I'd take care of her. He was so proud of her dreams, and I didn't want her to give them up because of money. So I built my business from the ground up and funneled everything into that trust. Emily's face had gone white. No, she whispered, shaking her head. You're lying. This is some twisted attempt to make me look bad. I pulled my phone from my purse, tapping the screen to show my banking app. A series of identical transactions filled the screen, each one labeled Bennett Family Educational Trust. Here's every transfer, I said, sliding the phone toward her. 7 years. Almost $300,000 in total. The guests began to murmur, whispers filling the room like a rising tide. Derek's wife covered her mouth, her eyes wide with shock. Jonathan leaned back in his chair, his face hard. Emily, he said coldly, is this true? Emily's mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. Finally, she managed, I didn't know. I thought it was from Dad. You never asked, I said, my voice breaking slightly. You just took the money, year after year, while looking down on me, on the very person who made your dream possible. The table fell into a heavy, condemning silence. And for the first time all night, Emily didn't look powerful or polished. She just looked small. Emily sat frozen, her hands trembling as she stared at the proof of my payments on my phone screen. The room was so quiet, you could hear the faint tick of the grandfather clock in the hallway. Finally, I reached into my purse once more and pulled out a second envelope, this one slim, marked Notice of Cessation of Support. I laid it beside her plate with deliberate care. "What's that supposed to mean?" she asked, her voice cracking. "It means," I said evenly, "that as of today, the trust fund is closed, permanently. No more deposits, no more anonymous help." Emily's eyes went wide with panic. But my last semester, the tuition balance is still..." She frantically turned to Aunt Clara, then back to me. "It's $40,000, Rachel. I don't have that kind of money." My heart twisted, but I forced myself to stay firm. "Then you'll have to figure it out on your own, like I did when Dad died. Loans, extra work, whatever it takes. You're smart and capable, Emily. You'll survive." Tears welled in her eyes. "You can't do this to me." "I can," I said softly. And Jonathan, who had been silent until now, cleared his throat. "Rachel, your company name, Bennett Automotive Solutions, it's familiar because..." His expression shifted, realization dawning. "We use your services for our firm's entire vehicle fleet, don't we?" I nodded. "Yes, for the past 3 years." Emily paled. "Wait, you mean..." "As of Monday," I interrupted, my tone cool and businesslike, "that contract will be terminated. Consider it a conflict of interest. I can't continue to provide services to a firm where my own sister has publicly humiliated me." A ripple of shock went through the table. Jonathan's jaw tightened as he grasped the full financial impact. Lost time, scrambling for a new vendor, extra costs. Still, he gave me a single firm nod. "Understood," he said quietly. Emily broke then, sobbing openly. "Rachel, please, don't do this. You'll ruin me. You'll ruin everything." I stood, my voice calm but unyielding. "No, Emily. You ruined it yourself the moment you decided our family wasn't good enough for you. Respect isn't owed, it's earned. And for 7 years, I gave you everything, only for you to treat me like dirt." Her tear-streaked face lifted toward me, desperate and broken. I shook my head slowly. "I won't let you use me or shame me ever again. If you want to rise in this world, you'll do it on your own 2 feet, not on my back." And with that, I walked away, leaving her surrounded by the silence of her own choices. The fallout came fast and hard. Within a week of Thanksgiving, chaos erupted at Hayes & Parker LLP. Without my company maintaining their fleet of service vehicles, deliveries and client visits ground to a halt. They were forced to hire an emergency contractor at triple the cost, and even then, half their cars sat idle in the parking garage. Clients were furious, deadlines were missed, and thousands of billable hours vanished. By Wednesday, Jonathan Hayes called an emergency partners meeting. The verdict was swift. Someone had to take responsibility. Emily, who had been climbing the ladder toward partner track, was demoted to a low-level role in the basement document review team, a job usually reserved for first-year associates. "She's lucky she wasn't fired outright," Aunt Clara told me over coffee, shaking her head. "Jonathan made it clear she's on thin ice." Emily didn't call me, but word traveled fast through our small town. A month later, her humiliation spread beyond the firm. Other lawyers in the city had heard the story of the blue-collar sister funding the Ivy League lawyer's education, only to be shamed in return. Emily's name became a cautionary tale whispered in break rooms and networking events. Meanwhile, my company thrived. With the Hayes & Parker contract terminated, we had room to take on new clients. Jonathan himself, perhaps out of guilt or practicality, personally recommended me to another major corporation. By mid-December, we signed a $50 million 5-year contract to manage fleet services for a chain of regional hospitals. My business doubled almost overnight. The family found out soon after. At first, I dreaded their reactions, but I shouldn't have worried. Cousins, aunts, uncles, everyone was furious on my behalf. My cousin Mark, who runs a construction company, summed it up best at our holiday gathering. "Money doesn't make class. Emily proved you can have a law degree and still have none." When Emily tried to defend herself online, Aunt Clara shut her down by posting screenshots of the trust payments. There was no hiding the truth anymore. By Christmas, Emily was completely isolated. She didn't show up to our family dinner, and no one missed her. For years, she'd been ashamed of her roots. Now, she had no roots left to stand on. 6 months later, life looked very different. My business had grown faster than I ever dreamed. With the hospital contract secured, I'd hired 50 new employees and expanded into a second location. Bennett Automotive Solutions wasn't just surviving, it was thriving. For the first time, I could breathe without constantly worrying about payroll or bills. But success felt bittersweet. Thanksgiving had changed more than just my company's trajectory. It had redrawn the lines of my family. Emily and I hadn't spoken since that night. I heard bits and pieces through Aunt Clara. She'd moved to a small apartment in Queens, working long hours at a low-paying position in a tiny firm. The glamorous life she once flaunted was gone. Then, one quiet Sunday morning, I opened my email to find her name in my inbox. My stomach tightened as I clicked it open. Rachel, I've spent months in therapy trying to understand why I became someone who could hurt you so deeply. The truth is, I was so afraid of being seen as less than that I turned into someone I don't even recognize. I know I don't deserve it, but I'm sorry. Not for getting caught, but for every year I took your love and sacrifices and gave you nothing but shame in return. Dad would be disgusted with me. I'm disgusted with me. I'm not asking for money or even forgiveness. I just need you to know I finally see the truth. You weren't just my sister. You were my hero, and I was too blind to see it. Emily. Tears pricked my eyes as I read her words. For a moment, I almost picked up the phone, but instead, I wrote back simply, Emily, I appreciate your honesty. Forgiveness may come someday, but only when you've proven, through actions, that you've truly changed. In the meantime, stand on your own 2 feet. Earn what you have. Be proud of it. That's what I did. Rachel, when I hit send, a weight lifted. Emily's journey was hers to walk now. Mine was to keep building, to keep leading, and to remind myself and everyone around me that honest work is never something to be ashamed of. Because our worth isn't measured by titles or degrees. It's measured by character, and no one can take that away. If there's one thing I've learned from everything that happened, it's this. Setting boundaries isn't cruel. It's self-respect. For years, I thought loving my sister meant sacrificing for her, no matter the cost. I thought keeping my promise to Dad meant putting Emily's needs above my own, even when she disrespected me. But love without boundaries turns into exploitation, and that helps no one. Family loyalty is important, but it has limits. When someone repeatedly shows you they don't value your efforts or your worth, it's okay to walk away. It's not abandonment, it's choosing peace over pain. And above all, I've learned that hard work, no matter how humble, deserves respect. Society loves flashy titles and fancy degrees, but at the end of the day, it's the people who build, fix, and create with their hands who keep the world running. So if you've ever been made to feel less than because of what you do, hear me now. Your value isn't tied to a job title or a paycheck. It comes from your integrity, your character, and the life you build with your own effort. Never let anyone make you feel ashamed of where you came from. I never will again.